Hello, welcome back. Hi, inspired writers. So let's get started here. Just kind of getting us all on the same page about the Art Deco style and design and what we're going to be focusing on today. So the key words to define the Art Deco style are repetition, symmetry, geometry, and contrast between thin and thick lines. And I was actually in New York City last week teaching journaling workshops at Montblanc's corporate offices, and I made a point to go down and see the Chrysler building, and I actually did notice every single one of those characteristics that I just mentioned. Of course, one of the biggest additions in Art Deco architecture was using shiny and polished materials as well. And we see metallic colors like golds especially also playing a huge role in Art Deco design. So I would encourage you to try adding out some metallic elements to your designs after today's class. From a beginner perspective, I find it can be a little bit overwhelming when you're first learning a new alphabet or a new pattern or a new style to start thinking about integrating other dimensions like color or metallics. But it's also just really fun to experiment, and that's what these classes are meant to inspire you to do. But today we're imagining we're creating this by hand. So paper, pen, and ink compatibility is super, super important. So I want to go to the next page of our workbook here. Okay, invitation paper overview. And I want you to, as I'm talking, kind of jot down what you see me writing down or jot down whatever is resonating with you in what I'm saying. Okay, so we have invitation paper, sizes, materials, and weights. We're going to start with materials. But I want to, maybe just in the middle here, just make a note that in America and in Canada, where I'm from, we refer to paper in pounds. So it'll either look like that or like that. And in much of the rest of the world, it's GSM, which I believe is grams per square meter, if I'm not mistaken. So you can always convert, like, let's say I'm talking about an 80-pound paper and you're thinking, I don't know what that means because I use GSM. You can use an online converter to convert 80-pound paper to GSM, and you'll get a direct conversion of that. But in general, you want to use, from a materials perspective for invitations, you want to use uncoated cardstock, which means it has a matte, smooth finish. So I can write those adjectives here: matte, smooth, but not glossy. Sometimes it's referred to as cover weight, not text weight. So an 80-pound, as an example, text weight would be very different than an 80-pound cover weight. So we always want to look for cardstock or cover weight. And that leads us into the conversation about weight here. And so when it comes to the weight of a cardstock, you want anywhere between a typical, like if you're looking at cardstock as an example, so I'll write cardstock. You want between 80 to 100 pounds is quite common. So 80 to 100 pound is a heavyweight cardstock option. If you're using, again, I don't really want to highlight this too much because it's difficult to use with fountain pens, but something like a linen or what's called felt paper is another option. But that's really only if you are using, if you also want to do watercolor with your invitation. So I'm just going to show you an example of actually my own wedding invitation. So this was created like 6 years ago. This is on, I'll try to zoom in so you can see the texture. So that is on it's called felt, which has a bit of a texture to it because I used watercolor. So because I had watercolor on it, I wanted it to mimic sort of a watercolor look and feel. And typically in all of my invitations, like this is another example with a watercolor painting, I will print it and paint it directly on that textured linen / felt stock. If you're using something like a cotton or a linen or a felt, we'll just write cotton here. I would recommend 100 pounds plus. So typically like a 110 to a 200 pound would be ideal. And I have another example I will show you of, this is from a brand partnership that I did also for Valentine's Day. You can just see that thickness here. This is like 400 pounds. So comparatively, like this would be maybe 110 pound cotton, and this would be like a 400 pound cotton. And you can just see the difference in the thickness here. And then when it comes to sizes, and then I will check on our Q&A here. So this one's a really easy one. The gold standard size for invitations is 5 by 7 inches. So 5 by 7 inches. And if you were to do something like a square size, like the example that I just showed you here, where this was square, it actually costs more in Canada, at least. It costs more to mail square-shaped envelopes because it goes through a different processing method. So just keep that in mind. So next, we are going to be talking about composition. So this is a really, really fun part of invitation design. When we talk about composition, we're actually talking about creating sort of a thumbnail sketch. If you've taken any of my drawing classes, you might have seen that I am a huge fan of thumbnail sketches. And essentially what a thumbnail sketch is you're just taking, let's say, like a blank sheet of paper, and I will use just a ballpoint pen. This is my Origins collection ballpoint. I love it for just quick sketching and journaling. And I would just create, relatively 5 by 7 sized thumbnail sketches like this. As you can see, they're by no means the same across the board. This is purely from like a sketchbook perspective or scrap piece of paper perspective. And then we just start sketching out different layouts that might be inspiring to us. So whether you're looking at, past invitations that you've received in the mail, or maybe you have checked out some online resources that inspire you, like I will kind of find things and print them out and paste them in my sketchbooks and then try to recreate different versions that inspire me. So as an example, knowing that symmetry is a very crucial part of Art Deco design, I might create, a similar example like that where I create a diamond shape. And again, we're just sketching this out, and then I'm writing, I'm going to put their name plus name if this was a wedding invitation, and then I'm just going to block out the spots for the dates. Today I'm keeping things handmade, and so these little thumbnail sketches are just a way for you to sort of visualize what your ideas might be. Like I'm just looking at these and okay, these are triangles now, so maybe I want to create like that fan shape that we were just working on in the earlier warm-up. And as you're working on these thumbnail sketches, again, paying attention to not having a death grip on the pen from a sketch perspective. Like I'll just eyeball it here, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to have a thicker line. And then maybe I'm going to have 4 different fan shapes. And we start with that middle line. We go down. As you can see, I'm a big fan of this particular motif. But maybe here I'm adding some visual interest. Maybe actually, again, from a sketch perspective, I might want all these lines to be different sizes so that I can add these little shapes at the end. Like when we looked at the Great Gatsby cover, I was really inspired by sort of these trailing stars. And so how can I try to integrate that into my own design? So maybe I just have this starburst shape at the top, and then I start to create those trailing lines down the left-hand side of my page. So the way that you can kind of differentiate is, as I said, from the scale. So info hierarchy. So scale or size of information. So that's how you're going to differentiate them. But what do we actually need to include in an invitation, right? So it's helpful to just know exactly what we need to include when we're inviting somebody to something. And I will put it on the back of my paper here just so that you can see it better. But the first is your invitational. And then you want the event name or your people's names. For my wedding, it was Brittany and Scott, or it might be baby shower, or it might be dinner party. Then you want the date and time, date/time, the location, RSVP, and attire. So not every event is going to have a dress code, but if there is one, then you want to include that on the invitation. So just as an example, as I'm playing around here, like, please join us for a dinner party, and then I have the date and the time. And here I just started experimenting with this one, where I'm filling in the letters here with an Art Deco pattern, dine with us, and then maybe, you know, I'm adding some ornamentation here. But we definitely want to establish that information hierarchy, and maybe you just decide that the most important part is going to be this. And so when you're designing your invitation, you want to make sure that those names are the largest part of the invitation that you're designing. And here I have the off-center idea when it comes to creating a composition. So we have some different ideas for composition. We can make it super symmetrical, like that diamond example. We can do off-center, where maybe we're creating a repeating pattern down the side. We can do horizontal, like you see here. And the idea is to kind of just look at what is inspiring you the most, and then creating a composition based on that. Like, I saw this one just as a inspirational idea. It has nothing to do with Art Deco besides the metallic and contrast between the dark and the metallic. The actual design itself isn't very Art Deco-y because it's not very geometric, but it inspired me to think, okay, how could we create a horizontal design with this sort of large border and arched direction of alphabet, and create that for myself. So again, I would spend like maybe an afternoon just looking at different examples and ways to get inspired, and just go from there. Like, this would be super easy, where you're just creating a box. And again, I left one square. Oh, you can't see that down here. There you go. I left one square at the bottom and one square at the top. And we just go all the way around. And remember, you can always use like a light box if you don't want to draw directly on this paper. I did 2 down here. Perfect. And then we start thinking about, okay, how can I create something like this based on my knowledge of that Art Deco design? So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boxes over here. Make a little mark. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boxes over here. Make a little mark, because again, symmetry is very important in Art Deco design, and so we want to have the same on the left as we do on the right, and then we can go to a center point here and just start working on the design. And again, maybe we create that fan shape from here. Super simple, where we're always coming back to the center. And you can imagine, like, if you were just throwing a dinner party, how fun it would be to hand make. Thank you for being here,